everyone, welcome to Morning Laziness. This is Nilima Kayes, and today we are bringing to you an interview session with Ms. Eleni. Morning Laziness is an online magazine dedicated to women. It showcases various articles, personal life stories, and important matters concerning women. And today our interview, Ms. Eleni, happens to be the co-founder and commercial director at Sintali. So let us welcome our interviewee. Hello, Eleni.
Hello, very nice to be here today.
So how are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you. I am recovering from COVID, so excuse the slightly bunged up nose, but ready for a productive and good day.
That's great. So since you're involved with morning laziness, how do you normally kickstart your day?
I love mornings. I never used to be a morning person, but I think setting up your day correctly with a good morning is super important. So I like to wake up. I like to exercise before I start my work day, make a nice nutritious breakfast, have a cup of coffee, read the news, and then get going on my day. And I find that having those 2 hours in the morning to just have me time really changes my mindset and allows me to have a really productive and honestly just a better mood throughout the day.
That's great. And so reading literally helps you to change your mood and help you out to literally push you to stay active and productive throughout the entire day. So I do enjoy reading at the early hours of the day. It's a great medicine, I feel.
Definitely.
Right. So what is the goal you have set to achieve by the end of this day?
So we're currently recruiting. So I am in the process of selecting final candidates for the final round for a new position in my company. So the goal for today is to really pick out the 3 people that are going to go for the next round. So reading through CVs, going through some assessments, and really just making sure that we have the right people, because really a good team is what allows a company to flourish, and we're a really small team. So every person plays a really big role at Sintali.
Right. Now, what are your thoughts on the latest IPCC report that was released almost a month ago? So where do you think is the humanity going here with climate change?
I think it's pretty frightening. Every IPCC report that has come out is more and more severe about the impacts that we're facing and the challenge that we have ahead of us. I think they did a nice job this time of really, connecting the dots between what government can do, what corporates can do, what individuals can do, and really saying, we're in trouble, but it's not the end of the road, and we do have a chance to turn it around. And I think that's really important, because I'm guilty of this as well. When I read these reports, I think, oh my goodness, the world's ending. This is it. What's the point? Let's all go live on a beach. And it's tempting to have that because it is quite scary. But I think there's still so much hope and so much we can do together. And that's really the message of the IPCC report, is that we have to collaborate. We have to build bridges between what's going on the government level and what's going on in the corporate world. And we all have to play our part, not just what we do individually at home, but really what we do as members of society. So as voters, as consumers, as individuals. And that's really the resounding message from the IPCC report, which, alongside the fact that the world is changing and we can all see it when we look outside our windows. This is happening and we have a long way to go. And so we have to work together.
Right, very true. And it's, really very true that hope is something that is driving us to overcome this pandemic and overcome this catastrophe of climate change. So all these things, I think hope really helps a lot to stay positive, stay optimistic, and just keep going. Yeah.
Absolutely. Without hope, we don't have much else.
Right. So what are some green initiatives that you would recommend to be adopted to lead an eco-friendly lifestyle?
So there's a lot of different things you can do as an individual. I think oftentimes when we think about individual action, we think about things like recycling, which of course is super important. But in terms of your actual carbon footprint, typically there's 3 areas that are really key. One is your choice of foods. So having a very meat-heavy diet can have a big impact on climate. And that doesn't mean that every single person needs to be vegan, but it means that every choice that you make is a conscious choice. And so if you can choose to reduce the consumption that you have, choose the most friendliest of meats if you can. So something like chicken versus beef, and really just, making sure that you live a conscious life. And I think that's true for everything. The same is true for travel, right? So travel tends to have a very high footprint. If you go a lot of trips, you like to travel, it's really hard to sit here and say, never get on a plane again, because I know that I can't do that either. But what you can do is make sure that when you get on a plane, you offset. You can choose other forms of transportation where possible. You can choose to reduce the number of flights you take every year. I think everything is around, making choices that you can live with, but are also good for the planet. And that is around home. So insulation, living in an efficient home, thinking about, does your heat need to be cranked up really, really high all the time? Is your home really drafty and is you using energy? So things like that tend to be really the easiest ways in terms of your own lifestyle. But again, I would say as individuals, we forget that we play a bigger part in the broader ecosystem. So when you vote, you're voting for people who are representing you on governments and on policies. So make sure you know what the people that you're voting for represent. When you go and buy things, when you choose to buy, for example, the $7 t-shirt versus the $20 t-shirt, because the $7 is cheaper, but you also haven't thought about what the environmental implication is. All of that is a choice, and all of that affects the environment. So using your purchasing power, those environmentally friendly, just thinking of it as like a giant spider web of the world, and your part in it, and how you can influence left, right, up and down to really make eco living and the environment just, again, a conscious choice.
Right. And that was quite informative, in fact. And talking about flights, I think it has been almost 3 years since I flew to my home country. So yeah, I think I've making less carbon footprint with the pandemic and all those things. So yeah, but it's sad because I miss the home country too. Right.
So definitely reduce our flights.
Very true. So do you see a future for sustainability in this industry called real estate?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that's really interesting is that we never really think about buildings, except we spend most of our time in buildings, right? Like you live in a building, you work in a building, you get healthcare in a building, you shop in a building. They're everywhere, and they're not going to go anywhere. And so as we look towards sustainability, we look at the climate crisis, buildings have to adapt to the changing environment, but they also have to really reduce the emissions that they have. So the built environment actually contributes almost 40% of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions, which is a huge amount. And so if we do want to tackle the climate crisis, sustainability and real estate have to go hand in hand. And it's already been happening for the last 30 years. It's not a new thing. It just needs to happen at a much quicker pace and a bigger scale.
Yes, and then the recent IPCC report certainly asked for us to be much faster with our response towards adapting, an eco-friendly lifestyle too.
Absolutely.
Right. So now let's move into some questions about your professional life. So you may start introduce Sintali to us. What exactly drove you towards establishing this platform?
Absolutely. So Sintali is an environmental verification body looking at the environmental impact of the built environment. So what that means in slightly less fancy words is essentially we're sustainability fact checkers. So we are checking claims that buildings that say they're green are actually green. And that's really important because, we live in a time where fake news is prevalent, where sustainability claims and commitments are all over the news. You read all these oil and gas companies are claiming net zero and everyone's saying, yes, we have to do this, which is great. And it's super important. But you also need some accountability measures and some transparency that progress is actually being made and that it's not just talks, but it actually is action. And so that's what my team does. It's quite unconventional, I think, for a startup. Most people would think startups are some crazy product, or if it was in sustainability, it might be consultancy or something like that. So it's quite rare to find a startup looking at verification. But my co-founder and I are really big believers in really showing. And an opportunity came up about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, for us to really set this up. And for a huge part of our company, we work with the World Bank on a green building program called EDGE. And so we're certified against the EDGE green building standard. And that has huge potential to really transform real estate around the world because it's really focused on accessibility and transparency. And so everything kind of aligned to allow us to take the leap of faith. I didn't have grand plans. I think if you asked me 3 years ago what I was planning on doing, I didn't have grand plans to start a company. It's sort of, different things aligned, but it's been, I think, one of the best decisions I've ever made. And there's so much room to grow because, as we mentioned, sustainability is such a large topic and affects all of us and isn't going anywhere. So there's a lot of potential for growth and expanding in different areas.
Right. And now, do you think green real estate investments could perhaps influence an individual's perceptions about sustainable livelihood in future?
I think so. Again, I think, we kind of take buildings for granted, but people realize when buildings are bad. So, you'll realize if your building doesn't have windows or if it has bad ventilation or if your energy bills are really, really high, you become very aware of it. And so when we invest in green buildings, and, the definition of green buildings is actually quite varied. It could encompass a variety of different things. So a green building could be one that has a solar panel on the roof, or it could be one that's energy efficient but doesn't have anything exterior that you would see. Or it could be one that has, natural ventilation and is healthy inside for the tenants with good air quality. So there's different ways of packaging green buildings. But there's tons of studies that show that actually green buildings really affect positively the well-being of their tenants, in addition to the actual environmental benefits as well as the economic benefits. So, companies, developers, investing in green buildings has a massive domino effect on the community, not just the people that are building the building. It brings benefits to everyone, and there's no real downside to building green. It's going to be the way that every single building is built moving forward. And then there's the question of, well, what do we do with all the buildings that already exist? And how can we make those better? Because they're also going to still be here in, 20, 30 years.
Right. Now, what were some challenges you faced administering this strategy?
So I think for us at Sintali, we face a couple of challenges. So one is we are a very small organization, so we're still startup mode. And we're already working in 75 countries. So we have a very global footprint, which can be talking about lots of languages, different markets, etc. However, one of the cool things that has actually come out from working at Sintali is how connected we all are and how similar our challenges are. So I think, we continue to face barriers in every market saying, okay, but green buildings are complicated. Green buildings are expensive. Green buildings, well, we don't really have them in our country, right? Everybody still has that mindset, and we see this in everywhere that we work. So that's kind of the challenge. But at the same time, there's something really interesting and positive about that, is that despite, Nigeria and Colombia and China and Peru and Romania and the UK all being very, very different, we all face similar challenges. And so we all have a similar step to take to really embrace green buildings and to really see a change in our markets. And part of that is honestly education. It's just the understanding that, green buildings don't have to be a luxury good. Green buildings don't have to be more expensive than regular buildings. Green buildings are just going to be the way that we're building moving forward. And really getting that message across, I think, is really the challenge that we're working on right now, to be able to bring everybody kind of along with us on the journey to realize that this is possible to the scale. It's not going to break the bank, and it's really important to do, but it will bring benefits to everyone.
Right. I do feel like cost is something that makes people think twice about going for something organic, something sustainable. As you mentioned, green buildings need not necessarily be expensive, and similarly, organic foods need not necessarily be expensive too, so that it could be accessible and affordable to one and all. And maybe that might perhaps influence people's perceptions about going for a more eco-friendly lifestyle, because they don't realize when the expense is more, they're actually investing on something worth it. So yeah,
absolutely. I think the issue of price and green has always been kind of hand to hand so far, and this issue of accessibility has to be addressed if we want everyone to be able to adopt sustainability. It both has to practically be addressed to make sure that things aren't more expensive, but then also the perception, because it's been so many years of that message. It's going to take some time to get rid of that and retrain everybody to think differently.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I think this whole problem is more common in developing countries than developed ones, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Although it's still common everywhere.
Right, poverty is obviously everywhere. Right. Now, where do you see Sintali in the next 10 years?
So 10 years is a long time.
Mm-hmm.
In different ways. So, there's quite a few areas that we would like to get into. We'd like to work more with cities and making sure that cities are kind of working on that city level. There's that verification process. Also more with banks. I think, we've seen so much green finance, and again, so many commitments from the banking side about money going into things that are supposed to be making our world a better place. Working more closely with them and making sure that the verification component is working really well there, and that we know that when money's going into something, there is that, added benefit for the world. There's that added environmental component, and then of course the social component, which is always very hard to measure. And then I think, in the long term, in the next 10 years, I think it'd be great for Sintali to actually develop our own certification standard. I think still to be determined in what component of sustainability it's really going to depend on, where there's a need. But I think, our vision for Sintali is that when people think about, trusted, credible source, and yes, there's like a Sintali mark there. That's kind of what we're building towards. So hopefully in the next 10 years, we'll be able to get there.
Right. Now, what are some green trends that you personally admire?
Green trends?
Right.
I think I really like right now this conversation around the fashion space and thinking about reusing and repurposing different things. The trend's, not that new. It's been around for a while, but I think it's the first time that we're seeing it really get into mainstream media and people really talking about moving away from a very, consumption-based pattern of buy new things, and more, okay, well, we have all these things. How can we reuse them? How can we, do clothes swaps? How can we sew them again? I think I really like that. And I think that's a really important green trend because it's applicable to so many other sectors of our society. And obviously we know that, by a lot of purchasing of new items, there's a huge environmental footprint. And so if we can rethink how we're using products and how we can, find better and longer life cycles for them, I think that this is the start of something quite important, similar to how we saw, the change of transportation with the introduction of shared riding services. I think if we can think about shared products or repurposing products, that can really change a lot in the world and really think about that. So I think for me, that's one of the most important trends happening right now, actually, in the green space.
Right. Now, since Women's Day is around the corner, what message would you like to convey to our women readers?
Sorry, could you repeat that question again? For Women's Day?
Yeah, right? Sure. Yes, for Women's Day, right.
So the construction industry is a very male-dominated one, and also as a young woman who happens to look young as well, having a position of authority has been quite challenging sometimes. I definitely feel like I faced a lot of condescending comments and not being taken as seriously as some of my male counterparts. And I think the only way that I've really managed to succumb that and really push myself forward is by being bold and trusting myself and trusting that I have a seat at the table and I don't deserve this any less than someone who's male or someone who's older or someone who is different. I think so a lot of that is centered around self-belief and trust that you know what you're doing, but then also taking a bit of a leap of faith and being bold and not feeling like you need to silence yourself or you need to be overly not cautious, but not feeling like you're going to step on anybody's toes, because you deserve a seat at the table just as much as everybody else does. And trusting that can really make a difference to speak up.
Right. And I think when it comes to women, age really matters. Age really decides whether you're taken seriously or not. Even you're too older or too younger, it really matters. So you need to exactly be in the middle range to be taken seriously. And that's not fair at all.
It's so unfair. And then it's like, am I getting punished because I don't look old? Like, what? It's a very strange world for women, I think, particularly because so much of it is tied around the way that you look, in a way that just doesn't apply for men. And that's just really frustrating, because it shouldn't matter. But I think, again, trust yourself, and also have role models and mentors, because I think when you see other people doing it, you trust more in the fact that it can be done, it has been done, and there are people carving the way, and you're following and helping carve the way for future generations as well.
Right. Now, lastly, what do you think this world needs the most?
Many things. But I think for me, the world needs more compassion. I think if we had more compassion in our personal lives, in business, in politics, we would be in a lot better place, because we would be more caring about the people around us, the impact of our actions, the impact of our inactions. And if everyone was more compassionate, there would be such a beautiful domino effect that would really help us, not see such a negative environment. I mean, right now we're living in a time where the climate is in crisis. We're seeing a war. We've seen a pandemic. I mean, there's so much going on. Be in a much better place, and I think set a much stronger foundation for recovery and for a more prosperous future.
Right. So let's all hope to create a positive domain filled with compassion in the future. So on that note, we come to the end of this interview session. Thank you so much for joining us today. I truly appreciate your time. And thank you, audience. Hope you had a lovely time with us.